advisor working with our personal wealth clients here at the advisory group.
And my name is Margaret Hiller, and I'm also a senior advisor. I work with personal wealth clients and also institutional accounts.
Margaret and I are really excited to put on this webinar on this topic that is really meaningful to us, women and money. We all come from our own experiences with this subject, and we feel that it's really important to raise awareness about some of what we observed and learned over the years. We want to say right at the start that we know that there are many very financially savvy women out there, including many of our clients and listeners. When we talk in this presentation, we are speaking more broadly and about our general observations, so it's not meant to be a critique by any means, but really just an opportunity to make progress for the future. Today, we're going to talk about how women may relate to money issues differently than men, and importantly, why women should feel more confident to engage around money and finance. That said, it's not surprising that some women can put off digging into issues around money and investing. And we're going to talk about some of our observations around why this might be. And although research shows women are very good, who do invest are very good at it, our financial systems and investments were largely created by men, and it remains a male-dominated industry today. So without more women in decision-making roles overall, both personally and professionally, it may not meet the needs of women investors as well as it should. Actually, when I became a certified financial planner in the early 1990s, women made up a very small percentage of those with the certified financial planner designation. I believe it was around 20% at the time. And at the time, I assumed that this would be changing in the coming years. So I was really discouraged to learn recently that in all of these years, the numbers haven't changed that much. In 2022, women made up only about 24% of certified financial planners, and our representation among all advisors is even lower, so closer to 10% of advisors, financial advisors overall. And another really discouraging statistic that came out recently is that millennial women are more likely to let men lead their financial decisions even than their mothers were. So 59% of women between the ages of 20 and 34 let their spouses take the lead on long-term financial decisions, compared to 55% of women over 50. You would hope we would have made some progress there too. But it's really important for many reasons that we'll discuss for women to be more in control of their financial lives.
And from my perspective, over the years, as some of you know, I've conducted many education sessions with young 401k plan participants. And I've also had occasion to put on financial literacy sessions for high school students. And each time I interact with these teenagers and young adults, I am surprised to see anecdotally that some of the gender stereotypes around money persist today, even in this younger generation. The boys on the whole are more interested in the subject than the girls, and sometimes they come with more baseline knowledge. I often ask them who in their family pays the bills, and often it's the mother. But then if I ask who handles the investments, the answer is more often than not the father. And this is actually how it was in my own family when I was growing up. So it's interesting to me that we now live in a time where most families have two working parents, and many women are living independently. Many women may earn as much or more than their spouses, more in some cases. And yet we still are not seeing that 50% of women are taking charge of the investments in the financial planning, even though they are strong contributors to the money in the household. And so that's the heart of the subject that we're hoping to understand and perhaps recalibrate today. So first, on the subject of relationship with money, everyone has a story about how they were raised with regard to money. Some came from families that struggled financially. Others may come from families that earned enough and demonstrated very disciplined habits about saving and spending. Others may come from families that always lived beyond their means, even though they had, that they earned what should have been enough. And then there are families that come from wealth, people that were raised wealthy. Some families viewed money as a sign of status. Others lived a very modest life that doesn't show how wealthy they were. Perhaps they were very wealthy, but lived more modestly. Some come from families that taught their children how to invest, and others grew up with no foundation on the topics at all. Cultural differences can also play a role. Since some cultures are more open about money than others. It's interesting to note that Fidelity's new Fit Women study found that the majority of women avoid financial conversations because they believe that it's either, quote, too personal or too uncomfortable to discuss, even with those close to them. Money is generally not considered something to talk about in polite company. So with all of those different backgrounds, we just want to say there's no judgment about what your story is, but if you want to change how you relate to your money, we hope that this presentation will be helpful. It's important because according to McKinsey, a recent McKinsey study, women will control $30 trillion by the end of this decade, up from $10 trillion today.
And as I touched on earlier, one of the persistent themes when we look into why women are less involved in investment and financial planning than men is a lack of confidence in engaging in financial matters. So this is a survey conducted by FINRA, which is a financial regulatory body, and it found that 71% of men think they have a high level of investment knowledge compared to just 54% of women. So when it comes to decision making, 49% of men feel comfortable making investment decisions for themselves, but only 34% of women do. So almost 2/3 of women are not comfortable making investment decisions. So since this is self-reported, it's hard to tell whether men's knowledge level is actually greater or they just have more confidence that they have financial knowledge. But there's a notable difference in investment confidence between men and women, even when we control, or when these studies controlled for education, income, and investment wealth. So there's actually several studies show this strong link between investment confidence and knowledge. So increasing your investment confidence may influence the investment knowledge gender gap that we see. And based on data we'll get into in a bit about the actual investment results of male versus female investors, women may have more knowledge and reason to be confident than they think they do. But for now, this lack of confidence can be an obstacle to a successful investment experience for women.
This 2021 study from Fidelity found that women are confident with day-to-day finances, such as balancing a checkbook or paying bills or managing a budget, but are, are less confident with bigger and more important financial matters, such as selecting investments, investing for short or medium term, or investing for and planning for long-term, including retirement. So this seems consistent with what we have observed anecdotally. In a balanced world, you would expect that half the time women would lead the investing and the other half men would, but that is not the case today.
So we want to spend a little time talking about our experience as we try to engage women to take more control of their financial lives, because we sometimes run into pretty consistent reasons that they don't want to dig in more about money and investments. So we came up with kind of our top 5 list that I've listed here. And we thought we'd take a few minutes to discuss these sentiments and maybe clear up some misconceptions. So The first one is that, and we do hear this a lot, investing is boring or stressful or confusing. And this is from women who are very accomplished in their professional lives. And of course, I understand that I find investment very interesting, but I can't say that I'm surprised or definitely not offended that others may not feel the same way. If there's any lawyers or accountants on this webinar, I can say sometimes I'm a little bored with your area, but I know that it's really important. And it's also true that in our field, it's some people in the financial industry may try to make things more complicated than they need to be, and creating complex investments and risky strategies. So our advice is to really focus on the basics. And there are some basic financial principles about risk and return and time horizons and the effects of compounding that you really do need to understand. But it's really in your best interest to tune out the latest hot tip and hype and just general noise, though I know that that's easier said than done. The most important thing is to make all of your financial decisions based on your own financial goals. So when you hear about something that's like a complex insurance product or crypto, or you really want to focus on whether or not this fits into your own plan and personal goals. So in general, in terms of it being stressful, one way to reduce feeling overwhelmed when you're dealing with your finances, as many things, it helps to break up your goals into smaller, more manageable milestones. Just like you can't wake up one day and decide you want to run a marathon the next day. You have to start by setting some interim goals along the way. So we suggest that, and when we do planning for people, we don't focus on some impossible or what seems like an impossible goal at the end, but how much you might be able to save annually, for example, and start by looking at your spending and savings or other financial goals like getting your estate plan done or making sure your insurance is sufficient, things that can also really affect your financial wellness and your current needs.
Another comment that we hear is that investing feels risky or that it feels like gambling. I will admit that before I got into this business myself and learned more about risk and reward when investing, I sort of thought of investing as gambling too. It seemed to me at that time that you buy an investment, hope it goes up, and if it doesn't, then oh well, that was just your bad luck. And in fact, I will even admit that when I first saw a risk reward chart, this is a true story, when I first saw a risk reward chart, I remember thinking, why would you not just take more risk to get more reward? But of course, that was before I understood that the risk reward chart doesn't come with any guarantees. So I think that this chart here helps to put the concept of risk into its appropriate context. The chart is showing that based on current year statistics, and this example is a 70% equity portfolio, 95% of the time, this diversified stock portfolio is expected to return somewhere between roughly -14 and +33% in a given year. But you see that these ranges of highs and lows narrow over time. So even though the average remains the same, the highs and the lows, kind of narrow and close in on those amounts. So after 5 years, 95% of the time, the average annual return is expected to range somewhere between -3 and +18%. But then after 10 years, the range is somewhere between roughly 0% and 14%. So it helps to show that the longer you remain invested, the less risk there is of experiencing a loss.
Another reason that women give for not focusing on their long-term investments is that they plan to work a long time and they have plenty of time to save. And even though you may plan that, sometimes that's not in your control. And that's what a recent Goldman Sachs retirement survey reported, that women are much more likely than men to retire because of external forces such as health or caregiving. And in many cases, we know that women are still primary caregivers, so they may be called on to take care of a parent or ill spouse, ill children, or even grandchildren, or just take care of grandchildren. The study found that more than 60% of women retired earlier than planned, and 66% of women retired for reasons that were not within their control. So, since women are already less prepared for retirement generally, sometimes due to taking time off to raise children or choosing a less lucrative career path to raise their families, or just ongoing pay inequity. So, it's really an important issue. Um, because you may not be able to work as long as you expect, and that will really place more pressure on your savings to last even longer than expected.
We've also observed over the years that some women tend to ignore their investments and their financial planning because they figure that they earn a strong income and therefore it will hopefully work out okay. But the reality is that solid financial planning is not just about how much you earn. It's really, how much you save versus what you spend. So the prudent planning also prepares you for longevity and also for unexpected setbacks or emergencies. We've also noticed a shift in how people think about their money and investing when they retire. So it's one thing to experience an investment loss when you're working and you feel that you can work and you can earn it back if needed. But it's quite another when you reach retirement and no longer have a paycheck coming in, perhaps, or probably have no income coming in besides Social Security. And so the money that you have in your investment portfolio has to last the rest of your life. We've observed that that is something that, there's really a change in mentality when people reach that point. It's hard to adjust psychologically to the idea of not earning a paycheck, especially when there's so many unknowns about how long you might live and what your healthcare costs might be later in life. So our advice is that it's best not to assume that your current strong earning power is going to smooth over any shortcomings in your investment strategy or your financial plan. The more that you're proactive about devising a plan and preparing for these contingencies, the better off you will be.
And then some just say that they will let their partner handle it. And, this can sometimes be part of an explicit or not so explicit breakdown of responsibilities within your relationship that, you know, as we saw before, like women might handle the internal budget of the house, but men handle the long-term investment. But really, your money matters are so vital to your overall well-being that it really can't be fully delegated to someone else. And these are some results of a 2-year survey run by UBS, where they, found, as we talked about earlier, that 85% of women handle day-to-day finances, but still 58% of women, and that's worldwide, say they defer to their spouses when it comes to long-term financial decisions. And then the discouraging statistic that I mentioned earlier, where 59% more millennial women defer to their partners to lead on financial matters, which is more than their mothers who are over 50, because women over 50, about 55% of those let their partners take the lead on finances. So we would have hoped to have seen those numbers improving and more millennials being engaged and not delegating that, but actually it's fewer. And in terms of letting your partner handle it, of course, the biggest risk is that you will not always have a partner. 76% of widows and divorcees said they wish they had been more involved in financial decisions when they were married. And that's probably because 74% of women discovered negative surprises after a divorce or death of a spouse. So even if your partner may be more involved in the planning and investing, it really is important that you are truly informed about the plans that affect you.
One challenge with financial planning and investing is that it's increasingly common for people to live well into their 90s. So the retirement period can really last for 30 years or more. It's interesting to note that life expectancy in the US and around the world steadily increased for many years, but it has suddenly unexpectedly declined in the US, at least for 2 years in a row. This statistic is somewhat misleading if you dig into it. So as the chart shows, and this chart is showing the US in the red line, and then comparable countries and what their average life expectancy is in the gray. So this chart is showing that life expectancies declined around the world in 2020 due to COVID, and then declined for a second year in the US, but increased in other similar countries around the world in 2021. This chart doesn't really tell the whole story though, because it's only speaking to life expectancy at birth. So life expectancy changes as people age. So people who've already made it to 75 years old are more likely to live to be 95 than a newborn baby is likely to live to be 95. So if you were to run this chart to show the life expectancy of a 50-year-old, it would be higher than what is shown here, in some cases considerably higher. So you might wonder why life expectancy dropped again in the US in 2021, even though it increased in other countries. With our medical advancements and our access to healthcare, it seems counterintuitive that life expectancy would be on the decline here. And this statistic, sadly, is really a reflection of the fact that the US is experiencing significant loss of life of people who are under age 50 to things like gun violence, car accidents, opioids, and more. So the reality is, if you're already over age 50 and not living a lifestyle that would put you at higher risk for these types of deaths, your life expectancy is higher than what this chart suggests. So if you're reading stories in the news that life expectancy is coming down to 76.1, that probably is not really relevant to you. And if you're a woman, you may expect to live, about 5 years longer than the average man. So saving, investing, and financial planning have never been more important for women than they are today.
So one of the more interesting things in research that we find is that for all the lack of confidence and self-identified lack of knowledge, women who do invest have been shown in several studies to be better investors than men. In this, there's a Fidelity Women and Investing study in 2021 that showed an excess return by women of about 0.4%, which might not seem like a lot, but it is more. And when it's compounded, it can really add up over time, and certainly is a reason for confidence among women. It also reported some positive investing behaviors that women exhibit, and some of them are not all that surprising, including spending more time researching their investments. And actually, this might be an outgrowth of a lack of confidence. So they really want to fully investigate before investing. Once women do invest, they tend to trade far less often than men. In fact, men trade 45% more than women, and this lack of staying consistently invested for the long term can hurt men's returns, while women are more likely to stick with their plans. Women are also more likely to have appropriate levels of risk and return in their portfolios, and are less likely to chase hot stock tips or investing tips in general. For example, in the US, there were 3 times more, men were 3 times more likely to invest in crypto. In 2022, crypto currency investors were reported to be 74% men and 26% women. So as part of our goal as advisors is to really help women become more interested and confident in investing, because once they are, they tend to make really good investment decisions.
There is evidence that women in the financial industry also surpassed their male counterparts. In the book, The XX Edge, Unlocking Higher Returns and Lower Risk, I think that's such a great name, the authors found that while women made up only 7% of hedge fund managers, they paid more attention to risk management and outperformed the male hedge fund managers over the 10-year period from 2000 to 2009. And as you may recall, that period included both the dot-com bust in the early 2000s and the global financial crisis from 07 to 09. So there really were some periods with very high volatility. The book also found that women fund managers were more prudent about borrowing and have lower rates of loan default. And sadly, yet they still paid higher interest rates. The book found that adding women to decision-making roles in organizations leads to better outcomes in investing.
And so here I think is this one of the more frequently quoted studies by Wells Fargo advisors. They looked at their investors with over $50,000 invested, broken down by gender. So it was broken down by whether it was a female-led joint account or the account of a single woman, compared to joint accounts led by men or just an account in the name of a single man over a recent 5-year period. And they found that when they adjust for risk, women outperformed men by significant margins. So in absolute terms, men's rate of return may be higher, but when taking into account the risk on those investments, they perform more poorly. And risk is generally, and in this case, measured in terms of the volatility of an investment in a portfolio. And as Margaret showed earlier, what the experienced highs and lows are over time. So women do tend to take on less risk, but they are rewarded more appropriately for the risks they take. And this is really a key to successful investing, making sure that to the extent you take on risk, you're rewarded for it in terms of the appropriate returns. So in this case, women-led joint accounts performed slightly better than men that were joint accounts led by men. So on a risk-adjusted basis, 1.29 versus 1.22. But single women outperformed single men more significantly. 1.37 versus 1.15. So again, this is not the returns they earned, but the unit of return per unit of risk taken, which is a very important metric when investing.
So now that we are clear that women are in many ways better investors, but may be held back by a lack of confidence, what are the steps that you can take to ensure that you develop and maintain a healthy relationship with money? So the first step is to know where you stand. This involves coming up with a net worth statement listing all of your assets and liabilities. So that's usually fairly straightforward. The second part is often harder, which is getting a handle on how much you spend and where you spend it. And I will tell you from my own firsthand experience with a family, sometimes that's harder than it sounds. In our household, for example, the challenge is reimbursable expenses. Is that our expenses per month are not really representative of what we personally spend, because a good portion of that is reimbursed from other places for various reasons. So whether it means learning how to use Quicken or hiring someone to do your bookkeeping for you or sitting down in Excel and really studying this, it's important for you to understand where you spend your money, how much you spend, and how much you can save if you are intentional about it.
So to me, one of the reasons that I find money and investing interesting is how it can be used to enhance your life, and just seeing how people use it for the well-being of their loved ones and communities. And since other people's priorities are not the same as yours, it's really, really important that you have a clear idea of your own goals and what's important to you. And that's something no one else can do for you. Um, you're going to find that there are going to be trade-offs probably on your path to financial freedom. So being clear on what your goals are helps you from being distracted by things that just aren't part of your plan. So you really need to be explicit about what's important to you, about what really matters in your life, because that's where you're going to be spending your resources, which I think for everyone is their time and money. Um, as an advisor, there's probably nothing that's more interesting to me than learning about people's goals and what's important to them in their planning. Because while some things are going to be similar, there can also be significant differences. And just recently, something came up when we do a financial plan, we often break out a separate goal for travel because that's a pretty common goal that many people have in retirement. You know, they want to see places they haven't had a chance to visit yet. And recently, I was talking to a couple and asked them about setting aside funds for travel, and they said, "No, we really don't care about traveling. We love where we live. Most of the people that are most important to us are nearby, so I don't plan to travel much." And it was really just great to see how clear they were about their priorities. And it sounded a little like a country song, I have to admit, but it really happened. It was really cool. Um, and so this is kind of defining your goals and making money a way to enable that life that you want to live is really at the core of why we want um, we want people to be focused on that and ignore media influences or even your own friends and family and what they think your goals should be, and just keep your eyes on your own paper, tend your own garden, and being really focused on that increases your chances of making your goals a reality.
The 2021 Fidelity study found that women who do these 5 things feel more confident about their ability to save for future goals and make investment decisions. So the 5 things are to invest consistently out of every paycheck, to use diversified investments such as mutual funds and ETFs. In other words, don't try to become a stock picker. Um, to take a long-term approach to investing, since that helps you maintain perspective during the volatile times. And then to start early, which of course there's no going back now and changing when you started, but this is a lesson for children or others around you, friends and family, to start saving early. And to make time to educate yourself about the economy and personal finance topics. It's important to just let go of any preconceived fears and assumptions that you have about investing that may be holding you back.
We've included a few educational resources here since it really can be hard to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to investment information. Of course, there's our blog, which is called Insights and is on our website at advisorygroupsf.com. We also think a good source of just general information is Investopedia. It can go in depth on some more complicated issues and generally has accurate and clear explanations. I would avoid Chat GPT for now with your investment questions because I've tested it myself. And there is some good information, but some that's questionable. And, some people wouldn't be able to tell the difference. One of the kind of standby books that we've been recommending for years is the Wall Street Journal Guide to Understanding Money in Investing, because it covers a lot, and it's been updated over the years, and it covers a lot of important saving and investment topics very objectively. There's also a popular podcast called Planet Money, which I think tends to have a lot of topical economic and finance issues. I learn a lot from it. It calls itself a podcast about the economy for people who think they are not interested in economics. Um, so, that's something that can be kind of a good entree. And the last resource, and of course there's many others, but this is a podcast that has online workshops called Money Zen. It's specifically for women, and it really focuses more on good money behaviors and avoiding bad or toxic relationships with money.
So with your goals defined and your current situation illuminated and your financial knowledge increased and your confidence about these subjects greatly improved, it's now time to put it all together and develop a plan for success. If you have these 5 things, the desire, the discipline, the resources, the knowledge, and maybe most importantly, the time, you have everything that you need to do it on your own. However, if you have several of these requirements, but you are missing others, you may find that it makes the most sense to hire an expert. So this is where Lisette and I can help. We pride ourselves on being approachable to female investors in particular, and we really enjoy the process of working with clients and helping them gain clarity about their finances, and also educating them and consulting with them on these topics. So if you or someone you know could benefit from professional help, please, of course, do not hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Margaret and I want to encourage you to contact us if you have any questions at all, or if we can be any of assistance with any of the items we discussed. If you have any questions, I don't see any questions online right now, but if you have any, of course, reach out to us directly and we'll be happy to chat. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.